Hey, up. Right, I was scanning my emails yesterday. We've had this storm jostling thing which was making the filming project that I had planned a bit doubtful. So, whilst waiting for the 55 to 65 mile an hour winds to calm down, I thought I'd sort of get on with some channel admin. Now, I get a lot of emails a day. My spam folder alone usually accumulates about 350 emails, and then I've got my inbox which can have up to 150 emails, and every now and again among them I get questions from viewers. I try to answer them where I can, but that's not always possible due to time limitations, but one did catch my eye yesterday from a Mark Huckleberry. Mark Huckberry. Now, I won't read the email out, but Mark lives in the States in one of the major cities, and he was looking for a city motorcycle, if you like, something to get him to work and do errands. He likes the Royal Enfields. He's particularly keen on the Royal Enfield 350s, but he can't make his mind up which of them would constitute, the best case for a city bike. Now, from what I can gather, this will be Mark's first new motorcycle. I got the impression he's not a really experienced motorcyclist, which is why he's asking me the question. But one of his concerns was the weight of these bikes. He was a bit concerned that they're all a bit too heavy for a 350 city bike. And this is a subject that comes up a lot on this channel in the comments regarding bikes that I've spoken about or reviewed. Someone always puts in the comments, this bike is too heavy for a 350, it's going to be difficult to manoeuvre, it's not got enough power to carry that kind of weight. It seems to be a huge consideration for a lot of people, and it's perplexed me. Now, I suppose in a way it's not surprising, because most of the reviews that we see here on YouTube, a lot of the reviewers make a big thing about the weight. And in Mark's case, obviously, this represents quite a substantial investment for him, and he wants to get it right. Now, I have sort of partially covered this in previous videos as a side note. I've never made a video sort of dedicated to this subject, which is possibly why these comments and questions keep cropping up. So I thought what I would do today is try and sort of answer this question once and for all and deal with the subject of weight, not just for these three motorcycles, but for all motorcycles really, because I'm going to be quite honest, whenever I'm looking to buy a new motorcycle, I never even look at the weight. It's not a consideration for me. And I'll explain the reasons for that in just a moment. But first of all, I suppose we ought to sort of discuss why motorcycles are perhaps heavier than their equivalent size from years gone by, in the 1970s, the 1980s, or even way back to the 60s and the 50s. So that's what I'm going to lead with, because this is always part and parcel of the comments that I receive on the channel. Why are modern bikes so heavy? Well, the way I see it, there are three major reasons for the increase in weight on motorcycles. First of all, we've got litigation and safety. Even back in the 80s and the 90s, litigation on the part of a customer against a manufacturer of anything was a very rare thing. So back in the old days, if you like, when manufacturers built a motorcycle, they tried to make it, understandably, as light as they could. Not just to make the bike more appealing to customers, but also it was often, part and parcel of a cost-cutting measure, which did, as we know, on occasion lead to component failures which could result in an accident or third-party claims for damage to property, injury claims. So as time has gone on, especially over the last 20 to 30 years, manufacturers have had to make the decision to beef certain components up to ensure that the likelihood of that sort of thing happening is a very, very rare occurrence or avoided altogether. And this in turn will have led to a slight weight increase for a lot of motorcycles as manufacturers learned lessons about, where to make these improvements. And then on top of that, there's been an advance in technology. And manufacturers have to keep up with their competitors. I mean, one example that sort of springs to mind is hub brakes. Certainly up till the late 1960s, hub brakes were the norm on a motorcycle. Relatively lightweight because they were incorporated into the construction of the actual hub of the wheel, so they didn't add any weight. Usually cable or rod operated, so there was no additional weight from hydraulics. But they weren't always particularly efficient at actually stopping the bike. So, when a competitor introduces a hydraulic front disc brake system to his bike, to stay competitive, you have to do the same. So you're putting an iron rotor on the front and an additional caliper, which probably adds about a kilogram to the weight of the bike. And this metamorphosis continues. Your competitors put rear discs on the bike, and that's what your customers expect, so you have to do the same, again increasing the weight. And we have things like gearboxes, 3 and 4 speed gearboxes, again were the norm even into the 1970s. But in an attempt to tempt customers, manufacturers added an additional gear. This means extra cogs, extra weight. And then customers start to expect this on every bike. They see it as a selling point. So this, if you like, game of manufacturers' top trumps continues, and now 6-speed gearboxes are the norm. They will have added weight to the motorcycles compared to, similar bikes of days gone by. And in that respect, bikes have gradually got heavier and heavier. And, some of the things that manufacturers were able to do to try and offset that weight is things like plastic mudguards. Again, even going back to the 1970s, metal mudguards were popular. They were the staple of most motorcycles. Swapping to plastic, because it's not, generally speaking, a structural component, allowed manufacturers to offset the gains in weight. Even things like plastic switchgear instead of, cast alloy switchgear. But then, and I've seen it here on YouTube, reviewers start to throw a spanner in the works. Oh, this bike's got plastic mudguards, it feels cheap and tacky. Or, the switchgear on this, it's made of plastic, it feels flimsy, I'm not sure how long it's going to last. Customers start to parrot this, and, the manufacturer finds themselves in a no-win situation. And in Royal Enfield's case, where these bikes are very much based on bikes of days gone by, they have, in some cases, especially on the classic 350, had to retain metal mudguards, because that's what customers are demanding. And, we're even seeing on some of the models now they're having to reintroduce cast aluminium switchgear, because that's what the customer wants. But then the customer complains about the weight. And at the end of the day, there's only so much that a manufacturer can do to, mitigate people's concerns over weight, over people's demands on what they want. And then, on top of that, we've got legislation. Over the years, governments, especially, it's not a government, but the European Commission, have dictated that we have to have emissions control systems fitted to the bikes. We have to have ABS fitted to the bike. A catalytic converter alone can add between 5 and 10 kilograms on a motorcycle. And ABS certainly isn't a weight-saving device. So this bloats the weight of the bike even more, and there's nothing the manufacturer can do about this. It's got to fit certain standards, it's got to be fit for purpose, and the technology doesn't allow it to be done any other way. So at the end of the day, in order to meet, legislation and regulations, customer expectations, and litigation defence, the weight of a bike is today the weight of a bike. It's a fact of life until someone discovers or invents a lighter than air super strong metal called unobtainium on a distant planet called Pandora, and then everyone will be complaining that the bikes are too light and they keep floating away. Now, earlier on I mentioned that, when I'm looking for a bike, I never even look at the weight. It's not a consideration for me, and that is because a good, skillful motorcycle manufacturer has a few tricks up its sleeves to mitigate that extra weight. Now, it can't make that weight disappear, but what it can do is design the bike in a way so that weight is not a problem and it's not noticeable. Most manufacturers get this right, Occasionally some manufacturers get it wrong, and I have to say that in the case of all 3 of the 350 Royal Enfield models that I've test ridden, Royal Enfield has got it very right. Because a good manufacturer knows how to design a bike with a low centre of gravity. The bulk of the bike's weight is low down, so to all intents and purposes it's disguised or hidden. It's no longer a problem. Now, I know the exact wording and the source of this is sometimes been disputed, but I think it was Archimedes that once said, "Give me a place to stand, a lever long enough, and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I will move the world." Now, I know physically, because of the mass of the earth and the distances that would be involved in sort of getting enough leverage, this is physically impossible, but theoretically possible. What Archimedes was trying to say is that if you have enough leverage, you can move pretty much anything, and you can move it with ease. And those are exactly the principles that manufacturers build into the design of the motorcycles. They keep the weight low down, and then the, if you like, height of the frame acts as a lever. So you can actually take the weight of the bike really easy, as long as you don't go too far off the centre of balance. Anything beyond 10 and up to 15 degrees angle of lean, and these bikes are perfectly manageable. You know, you can keep them upright without any difficulty. On top of this, they go to great lengths in the choice of tyres and tyre pressures to minimise rolling resistance, which, despite the on-paper weight of these motorcycles, actually makes them really easy to manoeuvre about. And when you're actually riding them, the weight disappears completely. Now, having said that, I know, because I've spoken to them, there are some people who still struggle with the weight of these bikes. But if you're watching this video and that's you, don't leave a comment in the comments section about it telling me I'm wrong. Buy yourself some weights and do some weight training, or go and see a doctor, or buy a moped. I know that perhaps sounds unkind, but at the end of the day, the problem is you, not the bike. Unless, of course, we're discussing certain BMW models, in which case, yeah, it's not you, it's the bike. I myself am a man of advancing years, and I'm well aware that I'm nowhere near as fit and strong as I was 20 years ago, but I have absolutely no problems whatsoever manhandling these bikes around the garage or in and out of parking spaces. Which leaves just one more question to answer. Are these bikes underpowered for the weight? The short answer is no. The long answer is no, because first of all, let's just have a look at the weights of these bikes. The Royal Enfield 350 Hunter is 181 kilograms. The Meteor 350 is stated as being 191 kilograms. And the classic 350 Reborn weighs in at a hefty 195 kilograms. So we have around about a 14 kilogram deficit between the lightest bike, the Hunter, and the heaviest bike, the classic 350. Now, the Hunter has more plastic components on it. For example, the mudguards and the side panels are made from plastic. Meteor 350 has a mixture of both, and the heavier classic 350 Reborn, due to customer expectations, has steel mudguards and steel side panels. And the engines of all 3 bikes, which are basically the same, are reputed to produce just over 20 horsepower at the crank. Now, when it comes to assessing the power of any vehicle, whether it's a car or a motorcycle, the manufacturer doesn't include the weight of passengers into that sort of equation, because it's impossible to sort of dictate what the weight of a rider or passengers is going to be. It's an unknown factor. Now, when you're trying to work out whether any vehicle is sporty or gutless, it's not the actual power figures that are important, it's the power to weight ratio that's important. And it's generally accepted that that power to weight ratio is calculated by the tonne. So a quick bit of mathematics: the Hunter theoretically has a power to weight ratio of about 110 brake horsepower to the tonne. The Meteor 350 about 104 horsepower to the tonne, and finally the classic 350 Reborn tops out at around about 102 brake horsepower to the tonne. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that these are super bikes, but it doesn't mean that they're gutless either. Just to put this into perspective, my car, my Mini, is considered to be a sporty car. Not a sports car or a performance car, but a sporty car. It's not your average workaday run-of-the-mill family saloon. And I've always been quite impressed with it for a car. It's got some poke. A 1.5 litre performance-orientated motor that is reputed to top out at about 130 brake horsepower, but it's a little bit heavier than a tonne. So in actual fact, it works out to have about the same power to weight ratio as these three bikes. Add to that the drag coefficient of the larger, more exposed surface area when it's travelling along the road, and the additional rolling resistance of much wider tyres and the fact that there's 4 of them instead of 2. And from a standing start at the traffic lights, all 3 of the bikes will out-accelerate it to a point. Granted, these bikes are restricted. They do top out at 70 miles an hour, and to be honest, the Mini would probably make mincemeat of them at around about 30 miles an hour anyway, but they are far from gutless and underpowered. But they are a perfect city bike. They're lightweight, they're easy to manoeuvre, and they have more than enough power, certainly for city use and for back roads and A roads, which is exactly what they were designed for. Now, I do hope that this video has been useful. You know, whenever you're looking at a new bike, weight is never a big issue. In my view, it certainly shouldn't be a deciding factor as to whether you're going to buy that bike or not. There are other far more important things to consider. Never disregard a motorcycle on the basis of how much it weighs. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. You can help the channel out in other ways via the super thanks button down below, or even perhaps via my Patreon page. Every little helps, as they say. I will of course be back next week, so until then please ride safely and I'll see you soon.